This presentation, Technology, the Future of Work, comes from the launch of the Future of Work Research Centre at the University of Surrey, led by Professor Ying Zhu. Hi, I'm Glenn Parry. I'm Professor of Digital Transformation. I'm part of the Centre for Decentralised Digital Economy, Decade, which is a blockchain research centre. This talk, Technology, the Future of Work, I'll be talking about how technology may shape the future of work, because one of the themes of our centre is future of work, and hence we're working with Professor Ying Zhu in her new centre and hopefully exploring this very interesting area. Now, the hammer was leading technology once, and I started wondering what role it played. It's an innovation. Disruptive innovations bring a different value proposition. They change multiple elements of a business model. Generally, they initially underperform established offers, but typically lead to cheaper, simpler, smaller, and more convenient offers. Now, I'm interested in technology and how it transforms work. I'm interested in blockchain decentralized futures. But previously, I've done some work with Uber, and I was looking at how it changed transport, and I reflected back on this to look at the way technology innovations change things, whether it's infrastructural or more the physical artifacts. So let's start looking at London. Originally, the River Thames was the focus of transport in London. The Thames was the infrastructure that supported transport. So the Thames routes and slipways, that's the way you row up and down it and where you can park a boat, were recorded in the Domesday Book of 1086. Now, in 1510, Henry VIII licensed passenger trade. In 1566, the Company of Watermen and Lightmen formed to control the boatmen and address what Parliament at the time described as the many divers and misfortunes, mischances caused by evil and ignorant persons who robbed and soiled passengers' goods and also drowned them. So what they were saying was people were getting attacked or drowned by the people operating the boats, and they were stealing their stuff. So they regulated, they brought in policy to control this trade. Now, new institutions come in to regulate and protect customs and workers. Apprenticeships were then introduced, initially 1 year, then 5 years, and finally 7 years. Now, in 1799, there were 8,000 free watermen and 2,000 apprenticed plying their trade on the Thames. So the technology at the time was boats, the infrastructure was the waterway, but also between 1500 and 1900, some 5,000 ships were launched into the Thames from dockyards at Deptford and Woolwich, and from the many other private shipyards along the bank. So there are indeed many other people working in the boat building industry. Now, the boat had dominated transport for many hundreds of years, but the river trade was disrupted in the 17th century, initially by the English Civil War, which saw many apprentices leave their masters to serve as soldiers. A number of innovations came together that disrupted the trade. The first of these, the horse and cart. Horse-drawn hackney carriages. London introduced hackney or rental horse and carriages in 1588, which became popular. They were licensed to carry the public in 1637. Again, to protect the public from miscreants, an act of 1642 initially limited cabs in London to 200 coachmen. They were put under the control of the London aldermen and 13 elected master coachmen. These were institutions that protect both the customer and the workers. An ordinance of the regulation of the hackney coachmen in London and places adjacent was approved by Parliament in 1654 to remedy what it was described as the many inconveniences that do daily arise by reason of the late increase and great irregularity of hackney coaches and hackney coachmen in London, Westminster, and places thereabouts. The wheelwrights, independently of the coachmakers, made a separate petition for incorporation on the 3rd of February 1670. Charles II granted the wheelwrights a separate charter. Now, 1829 saw the first hail and ride horse-drawn omnibus. Infrastructure improved. By 1850, 200 years after the hackney carriage introduction, only 1,500 watermen still worked at 80 plying places. In 1864, the lightweight hansom cab was patented, though thought to be based on the lightweight two-wheel personal carriages that had arrived from France, named cabriolets, or shortened to cabs. Now, laws were brought in to try and protect the watermen, so carriages weren't allowed to pick up fares within a certain distance of the riverbank. Ships tried to come back. 1800 saw paddle steamers developed, so fewer boats or people were needed. Steamboats carry many passengers, creating value through scarcity strategy for river transport. So you're really looking at these boats were able to carry many more people. Today, the watermen and lightermen remain operating on the Thames, operating passenger boats and moving goods. Now, despite the innovation in ground transport, until 1700, there was still only one bridge across the Thames in central London, and the roads in winter were all often completely impassable. But in 1750, a new bridge was built. It was a bridge at Westminster. This was opposed by the watermen. They were compensated financially for loss of earnings. However, in 1859, Grosvenor Bridge was built. 3 years later, Westminster, then Battersea, Kingston, Hungerford, Cannon Street, and by 1894, 17 new bridges were in place. The technology that ended the water trade's dominant was the bridge, not the horse and cart. It was the infrastructural change that changed the way people worked. The wheelwrights and the coachmakers' companies actually flourished, growing in both numbers and social status. But interestingly, in 1801, it was discovered that there was not one practicing craftsman among the wheelwright company members. The craft had actually left the city and moved to the surrounding countryside, and also international trade was bringing wheels in from abroad. So despite these innovations, the work had changed and moved. Now, the horse and cart dominated, but technology was about to change. Innovation disrupted the horse and carriage. Now, early attempts at electric cars failed, but this was 1897, where the electric Bursley Hummingbird was introduced, a fleet of 75 cars, but they were unreliable and expensive, so actually removed in 1899. In 1903, the first petrol taxis were licensed. At the time, there were 3,623 horse-drawn buses and only 13 petrol-powered cars. In 1913, 142 horse-drawn buses and 3,522 petrol. The last licensed horse-drawn taxi was withdrawn in 1947, so it did carry on for quite some time. Black cabs evolved directly from the hackney carriage, as did their training, the way the people worked. Each cab is its own business. The knowledge, the form of apprenticeship, it takes a minimum of 3 years. It's controlled by TfL, Transport for London's the regulator, who ensures standards and practice, again, institutions to protect workers and protect customers. Market entry was made difficult, thus prices are high, such that a fair living could be earned. Now, petrol dominated for 100 years, but a new infrastructure was developing. In the US, research in 1974 evolved the Transmission Control Protocol, TCP, and the Internet Protocol, IP, and the two protocols of the Internet suite provide data networking. In 1990, Tim Berners-Lee outlined the principal concepts for a hypertext project called the World Wide Web, in which a web of hypertext documents could be viewed by browsers. In 1983, President Reagan announced the military global positioning system would be made open to the public. That then slowly rolled out. In 2001, 3G developed, 4G in 2008. Then came smartphones in parallel, but their sales overtook regular phones by 2013. What we had was this new digital infrastructure that then app stores appeared and people started buying applications on their phones. Infrastructures, as we've seen before, often bring more radical changes. Now, there'd been a new land battle for taxis. Most notable amongst these were Uber. Now, private hire vehicles were actually only regulated in London in 1998. Unlike a taxi, you can't hail a private hire vehicle on the street. It has to be pre-booked. There are institutions to protect customers and workers. But in 2012, Uber came to the UK, bringing the cab and booking, the hailing ability, to your phone. You're likely familiar with Uber cars and their use of web and GPS. But Uber is actually a data platform that links customer need with a logistics provider. The transport business acts like a dispatch service. But Uber isn't really just about a PHV, a private hire vehicle. It's actually a data platform. You may be familiar with Uber Eat, where you can order food. You may know Uber Rush. They deliver parcels. They've also developed a data offer for urban planning, Uber Movement, that shares Uber's data with urban planners that gives them empirical data to make their decisions. Now, looking forwards, Uber have a lot of travel and movement data from all the cars they have. This is the sort of data that's required for AI systems. Lots of driver training data for their vehicles can be used all over the world. Hence, Uber can develop a self-driving car. Now, going forward, there's new infrastructure or a new form of infrastructure. But the current web is largely based on centralized servers. If you like, the web's quite flat. But there's a new decentralized web being developed. This has already given rise to things like cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, NFTs that you're probably already hearing about. We've seen how infrastructure changes bring major change to the way we work, the bridge being the most influential in transport, and digital infrastructure changing the way we work, particularly through COVID, which has accelerated our adoption of online learning. We're looking at how distributed ledger systems create data sets that are difficult to change. Fundamentally, a blockchain creates a list of things that's difficult to change. And it makes it difficult to alter any claims you've made in the past. And if you share data in that way, it helps build trust between people because you can make immutable, unchangeable promises. What we're looking at is how maybe Internet of Things, sensors and GPS let us see who is where and what are they doing, and maybe making supply chains more sustainable, movement of people more efficient, use of equipment more efficient, records of work automated. We have, for instance, used the DNA in cocoa beans to track Kit Kat bars sold in Reading all the way back to their source in Ghana. We can create supply chain visibility that helps provide slave-free trade and support sustainable farming. We're integrating payment systems to help accelerate invoice payments, which can be linked to successful delivery. If you put a sensor in your parcel, the moment it's delivered, you could trigger using a smart contract a payment to somebody, and you can log all this in a blockchain so it's stored locally and it can be seen and checked by everybody. In combination with these technologies, we can create international supply chains that allow safe and traceable and visible movement of goods around the world with automated border documentation and tax payment. We can expect many changes in coming years with new jobs and opportunities as new technologies develop and this new decentralized infrastructure is exploited. And that's what we hope to do as we move forward with our research. Thank you.